Welcome to NVC Life. I'm Rachelle Lamb, veteran NVC trainer and relationship coach, helping listeners navigate interpersonal conflict and ground more deeply into relational living. Greetings, fellow humans. Today we pick up where we left off last week in my conversation with Melissa Schwartz about applying NVC in everyday life. I play the last 45 seconds of last week's episode to help bridge the two episodes. Here is part 2 of our conversation.
You try to bring up a conversation that people will willingly engage in. And we do this by recognizing it's hard. It is hard. It's hard for everyone. So let's see how we can do this together so that we have some good feelings about how we are living together. How does that sound?
When you say it, it sounds so inviting and warm, and it's hard to imagine that people would not want to join you. And again, I'm thinking about some of the feedback that I've heard from people who've participated in the summit who are in relationship with family members or neighbors or coworkers who they might describe as contentious, or people who are not wanting to have this type of conversation. Can nonviolent communication be a one-way street, or do both parties have to sort of agree to engaging in this formula? Like, can I approach a hostile neighbor who's letting their dog poop on my lawn, for example, or something that feels really out of my control, to approach them in this sort of nonviolent way if the response that I seem to be getting from them is very disconnecting?
That's a great question. People often come to nonviolent communication thinking that it will cure all of their relationships, which is not what it will do. It will be very supportive in many important relationships. And in other relationships, you won't be able to get the kind of, let's say, engagement that you're hoping for. But that doesn't mean NVC doesn't work, because it works on you. You get to maintain your level of dignity and humanity in the face of a challenging human being. So what you understand when you look at someone, that whatever they're doing that is so distasteful, okay, unsavory, is they're doing the best they can to fulfill a need. And the need they have is no different than yours. So the understanding in NVC is we all, at least certainly in our corner of the world, share the same needs. We use the same lingo. You know, we have a need for love. We have a need for care, respect, honesty, trust, meaning, purpose. So whatever the need is, and autonomy, because that's often one, like I'm going to guess, like if the neighbor not picking up, nobody tells me what to do. So they're defending their need for autonomy and to live freely. You have the same need too, but you have different strategies about it. And I don't want to take up the whole time that we have in learning how to get the dog poop off the lawn, but I think it's important to recognize you want to leave that conversation feeling like you at least understand what was going on for them. Don't make them your enemy. You know, there's a quote by Henry Wadsworth Longfellow, I believe his name, who was an American author, and he said, if we could read the secret history of our enemy, we should find in each person's life sorrow and suffering enough to disarm all hostility. But we don't know the whole story, but you can know that in every story there's suffering. And if you knew it, you get, I get it. Somebody hurt you. You've grown up this way. You had a hard childhood. Your spouse left you. Whatever it is, you lost your job. People are suffering, and we can understand that. It doesn't mean it's okay what they're doing, but it does mean you can understand it, and you can develop some compassion within yourself, which makes you a better person to be around.
Yes. And I love how you were talking about how the purpose of nonviolent communication, what it really is to have more peace within yourself. Did I hear that correctly? That's what you said, right? Because I think for us deep feelers, I keep putting all of us, the sensitives, the empaths, the intuitives, the psychics, the ones who feel deeply, we can be so easily overwhelmed by the woes and the sorrows in the world, or the woes and the sorrows in our own lives. And what I've come to learn through EMDR therapy and through practicing different healing modalities is none of it is to change the outside world. It's to change my inner world. It's to bring more peace to my inner landscape. And what I'm really hearing you say is nonviolent communication, correct me if I'm wrong, it almost isn't even for the people that we're communicating with. It's for us to be non-reactive in making our requests clear.
I would say it works the two ways. I think most people come to it because they want to fix all the crazy people in their life. And then at some point they recognize, oh, maybe I have something to do with this because I keep having these similar encounters in all my relationships. So then they're on to themselves, they're busted, and they go, okay, I'm going to do something. And it does work on them, and it works on their relationship. So it's two-pronged, which is great. And it does ask more and more and more of you as you commit to the process and the practice of it.
Yeah. Now, I heard you talking a bit about some of our needs as human beings. Can you speak more to that? Like, what are the most important needs that we have as humans?
That's very subjective, but I could say there's somewhere in the neighborhood of 5. We'll go with 5 top needs. I think that if you were going to do an inventory, ask people what are the top needs, you usually come up with love, respect, honesty, trust, meaning, purpose. I would say those are very big. Marshall Rosenberg himself used to talk about the need to contribute to life, which he saw as being the most important need. I would probably call it it's a fairly, I don't like to use the word advanced, but it has an altruistic, a larger picture. So it's moves more towards we instead of me. And so the need to contribute, what we recognize is when you contribute to life, you're not left out of that. And it comes back to you. You're part of the equation. And so I would say the need to contribute to life is the one I resonate with. And that includes love and respect and care. But people will have different starting points, of course.
Yeah. And as I hear you talking about that love and respect and care, it seems like this nonviolent communication really is an entryway into that, right? Into bringing that into all of your relationships and bringing that connection, connecting with other individuals, which again, for sensitive people feels like such an important, there we go, talking about feeling as though it's an emotion, but it does seem to be one of the driving factors for us, that we really thrive on this connection outside of ourselves, whether it's in relationships or just to like the universe, right? And to having this bigger purpose that you were just talking about.
Yeah, absolutely. It's important to recognize that human beings long for connection. We really do. We thrive in that. That's the kind of mammals that we are. We're social beings, social creatures. The interesting thing I find is that in nonviolent communication, or even just in the world in general, we are educated pretty much towards separation and not towards connection, even though that's what we love. Marshall used to talk about the fact that we would be taught to enjoy violence. Turn on the TV. What do you see? Even if it's a sitcom, people laugh at how other people are being hurt. And so we are actually educated in that way. So a lot of nonviolent communication is actually unlearning the social indoctrination, if you will, or some of the instruction that we received. Because one of the things I really appreciate about Marshall's work too is while he teaches you a language of connection, he also teaches you the language of disconnection, which I don't think many of us are aware of. You know, sometimes people will say to me, I don't know that I want to use a formula, so I don't want to use nonviolent communication. To which I would say, what makes you think you don't use a formula? You do use a formula. You're just so used to it. The formula is this: when someone says something or does something you don't like, You get defensive. You will resort to name calling or describing what the person is doing in a way that pushes them away. While you're longing for connection, you're pushing them away. So that's the formula that we use. So diagnosing people, demanding that people do things, thinking in terms of punishment and reward, and motivating people on those bases. You can't be surprised when you look at all the strife that is in the world when that's our way of operating.
Yeah, it's so interesting to hear you talk about what I would almost call violent communication, right? And really breaking it down into this formula, because I think it is so ingrained in our culture and our society. Are there other ways that you think culture really impacts how we relate to each other?
Oh, yes. Yeah. I mean, that's such a big subject, and it's one it's very dear to my heart. I've also been very interested in cultural anthropology. And the fact is, people who are being born right now, for instance, they come into this world, they see, at some point, they recognize, oh, like, what's that thing you're holding in your hand? That you seem to be so preoccupied with that. What is that thing? So they're born into a time, and they don't know what preceded. They go to school and find out some authorized version of history, but there's so much more history than what we learn in our classrooms. And if you think in terms of what is a natural way for a human being to actually live, and you take stock of the way we do live, it's not natural. It's not natural to, we'll just say, for instance, you set your alarm, you wake up really early, you drag yourself out of bed, you go to a job that maybe you like or you're ambivalent about it. It's very tedious. And if you think that how people lived some time ago, take a farming life, for example, you still get up early, but you're getting up early for a particular reason. You're probably going to go milk the cows, and this is directly connected to the food that you have on the table. We're so disconnected. The food we have on our plates now, we don't recognize where it comes from. We think it comes from the grocery store or DoorDash. We've lost that connection, so there's so much separation. And of course, there's building anxiety. And the people we call the sensitives, I think often what's happening is they're kind of like the canaries in the coal mine. They're letting you know, hey, wake up, people. This is not sane. It doesn't make sense. You're adapted to it, but I have a hard time adapting to all of this. It's chaotic. It's too hard on my nervous system. I mean, the nervous system is hugely impacted by all of these things. And then we can't be surprised that people look at the growing rate of suicide among young people. It's heartbreaking. The level of depression and anxiety, all of the medications that people take. So there's a much bigger picture here. And the thing that I guess I get heartbroken over is how many people think there's something wrong with them. You think there's something wrong with me because I can't cope. No, you're responding appropriately to an insane situation. And so we really need to be able to recognize that and slow down and ask ourselves, what is a good life? And what is a life that we can pass on to future generations? Because we have to think about the earth. There's climate change. There's so many things that are involved. And what are we teaching our kids? What are we modeling? There's so many questions that we need to ask and really take stock on.
You're speaking my language, Rachelle. There's so many more questions that I want to ask you, but for now, I'm curious, for people who want to learn more from you, work with you, how can they find you online? How can you support them in really integrating what we've been talking about today into their day-to-day lives?
Well, like many people, I have a website, and it's my name, RachelleLamb.com. You can find me there. I do offer online trainings about 3 times a year, but I also work one-on-one with people. I work with couples, and I work with organizations, and I'll go in and do trainings for people. So that's the bulk of my work right now.
your work is so important. And as you were talking about earlier about Marsha Rosenberg speaking about the need to contribute to life and have an altruistic, like a bigger purpose, I can't help but observe your work in contrast to the way that you were just kind of describing our world as being that, as you really showing up for the world to have this bigger purpose, to meet this clear need that our culture and our society is really voicing through the craziness that we as the sensitives are responding to. So I'm in such appreciation for the work that you do. I just think that it's life-changing stuff. And I'm so grateful for all of the information that you shared with us today. Thank you so much, Rachelle. Such a pleasure connecting with you.
Likewise. Thank you for the invitation.
A pleasure.
And this concludes the episode. I hope you enjoyed the conversation that Melissa and I had. I think it addresses many of the types of issues that do come up when people are first learning nonviolent communication, and I hope you found some of it useful. Thank you for tuning into NVC Life. For future episodes, be sure to subscribe on iTunes, Spotify, or YouTube. For free resources or to book a private session with me, head over to RachelleLamb.com. Until the next time, stay sane, grateful, and generous.